or just C. trachomatis, is a gram-negative bacteria that strictly infects humans, and it's divided into 15 serotypes, also known as serovars. A serovar groups together bacteria with similar surface antigens, and so are likely to cause the same type of infection. Serotypes A through C cause chlamydia conjunctivitis in adults, which is also called trachoma. Serotypes D through K cause a genital infection called chlamydia. Lastly, serotypes L1, L2, and L3, and there's no particular reason that these are numbered, infect the lymph nodes, causing a disease called lymphogranuloma venereum, or LVG. No matter the serotype, C. trachomatis is a gram-negative bacteria, meaning it cannot retain the crystal violet stain used during gram staining. However, unlike other common gram-negative bacteria which have a thin layer of murion, also known as peptidoglycan, in their cell wall, the cell wall of C. trachomatis has no murion at all, so it can't retain the pink safranin dye used during gram staining. So, C. trachomatis is best stained with Giemsa stain, which colors them pinkish blue. What's more, chlamydia requires vial cells or embryonated hen's egg for culture, which is technically difficult and expensive, so cultures are only done for research purposes. Chlamydia trachomatis is also non-motile and an obligate aerobe, meaning it absolutely depends on oxygen to survive. It's also an obligate intracellular pathogen because it's unable to make its own ATP for energy, so it needs to use another cell's resources. Okay, now when C. trachomatis enters a host cell, it undergoes a life cycle that alternates between two distinct forms. The first is the small spore-looking form called the elementary body, and it's the infective form of this bacteria. After the elementary body enters the host cell, it gets enclosed in a vacuole called an inclusion, where it transforms into a metabolically active, star-looking form called the reticulate body. The reticulate body can use the host cell resources to divide, and it does that by binary fission, which means that every reticulate body splits into two identical copies of reticular bodies. On a side note, if this sounds similar to mitosis, well, it is. But the term binary fission is used to describe division of prokaryotic cells, which don't have a nucleus, and therefore some steps in replication are different from mitosis. Now, eventually, binary fission results in a huge number of reticulate bodies, which then start transitioning back to elementary bodies. The cell eventually becomes too full, bursting open, and letting out a lot of elementary bodies in the surrounding fluids, where they attach to other cells to repeat the cycle over and over. Now, the resulting disease depends on the infecting serotype. So, serotypes A through C cause chlamydia conjunctivitis, or trachoma, in adults. Untreated, trachoma can progress to keratoconjunctivitis, a condition in which both the conjunctiva and the cornea are infected, which can result in total blindness if the cornea gets destroyed. Serotypes D through K cause chlamydia, which is the most commonly sexually transmitted infection in both men and women. In men, serotypes D through K commonly infect the urethral mucosa, causing an inflammation known as urethritis. Sometimes the infection can spread to the prostate, resulting in prostatitis. In women, there can also be urethritis, but the infection is infamous for affecting the lower genital tract, causing vulvovaginitis when the vulva and the vagina are affected, and cervicitis when the cervix is involved. From the cervix, the infection can extend up to the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and the ovaries, causing pelvic inflammatory disease, or PID. Occasionally, C. trachomatis can complicate into Fitzhugh-Curtis syndrome, which occurs when the inflammation spreads to the peritoneum and from there to Glissen's capsule, which surrounds the liver. This results in violin string adhesions, or thin strings of scar tissue that attach the liver to the peritoneum. If chlamydia affects a pregnant female, then there is a risk for the infection to be passed down to her baby during vaginal delivery. This can result in neonatal conjunctivitis, also called late-onset neonatal conjunctivitis, meaning the symptoms appear 5 days to 2 weeks after the baby is born. Alternatively, if the bacteria make their way down the baby's respiratory tract, it can result in neonatal pneumonia. Lastly, serotypes L1, L2, and L3 cause lymphogranuloma venereum, or LVG, which most commonly affects the inguinal lymph nodes. Symptoms of C. trachomatis infection depend on, well, the infection. With trachoma and neonatal conjunctivitis, there can be swelling of the eyelids, purulent eye discharge, eye pain, and photophobia, which is hypersensitivity to light. With C. trachomatis pneumonia, there's rapid breathing and staccato cough, meaning a short repetitive coughing with deep inspiration after each single cough. Now for the genital infection. In both men and women, urethritis can present with mucopurulent discharge and painful urination, also called dysuria. With vulvovaginitis, there's vulvar and vaginal discomfort, pain, pruritus, which is to say they itch, and foul-smelling vaginal discharge. If the infection has progressed to PID, it can cause lower abdominal pain and fever. And over time, if left untreated, PID can cause female infertility. Finally, with LVG, there are typically ulcerating papules on the genitals and swollen lymph nodes in the inguinal region. Chlamydia infections can be diagnosed with nucleic acid amplification tests, NATs, which consist of detecting C. trachomatis DNA in a biological sample. These can be swabs from the eyelids if neonatal conjunctivitis is suspected, pharyngeal swabs for pneumonia, urethral and endocervical swabs for a genital infection, or lymph node biopsies for LVG. Treatment of C. trachomatis infections is with antibiotics, and because it lacks murine in its cell wall synthesis inhibitors like penicillins are not effective. So usually, infections are treated with antibiotics that inhibit the synthesis of bacterial proteins, which can be macrolides like azithromycin or tetracyclines like doxycycline. One last point is that with genital infection, it's been found that they're frequently associated with a Neisseria gonorrhoeae co-infection. So usually, ceftriaxone is given along the anti-chlamydial regimen to also cover Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Alright, as a quick recap. Chlamydia trachomatis is a gram-negative, non-motile, obligate aerobe and an intracellular pathogen. Within a host cell, C. trachomatis undergoes a life cycle which alternates between a spore-looking form called the elementary body and a star-looking form called the reticulate body. Serotypes A through C cause trachoma, serotypes D through K cause a sexually transmitted infection called chlamydia, neonatal conjunctivitis, or pneumonia, and serotypes L1, L2, and L3 cause lymphogranuloma venereum. Diagnosis is done by using tests, like NATs, to detect C. trachomatis DNA in a biological sample. Chlamydia infections are typically treated with azithromycin or doxycycline, and for genital infections, ceftriaxone is added to cover a possible Neisseria gonorrhoeae co-infection.